everyone, welcome to this Crafter's Toolbox. Today we're going to go back to basics and talk a little bit about embossing ink and embossing reinkers and a few techniques that you can use with them. So if you've been around a while, these may be a review for you, just a reminder of some cool things that you can do with embossing ink. But if you're new to crafting, this is a great video for you to see how you can use this product in a multitude of different ways. So this embossing ink from scrapbook.com is similar to all other embossing inks. It's basically a sticky ink, and it's clear, and it allows embossing powder to stick to it so that you can go ahead and heat it up without all of your embossing powder going all over the place, and it works really, really well. And of course it has a reinker, so you can reink the pad, but there's also some techniques that you can use with the embossing reinker itself that are really kind of cool. So this is the card that I created with a whole bunch of different techniques on it, and I'm going to break these down for you today one by one. All right, so the first technique we're going to do is a tone-on-tone effect. So I'm using the Fresh Florals and Berries from scrapbook.com, and I have their large stamp block, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw a couple of these on here, and I'm going to create a background. So I think I probably just need like 3 of them on here. That's pretty good. And when I use something this big, I usually just take the ink pad and press it like this. So the cool thing about this is you can take the lid and it snaps right inside to give you kind of an extra handle if you need that. So I just go ahead and ink this up, and I'm just going to do these kind of one at a time. And you're going to see that you can see that ink right away. And the cool thing about this is that you could go ahead and just leave it like this. So you see how you can just see that flower in there? And that's pretty darn good. So this is the first technique that you can do, is to just do kind of a tone-on-tone kind of thing and create your own backgrounds. So this is one way that you can use embossing ink without even getting into heat setting and embossing and everything like that. In most cases this works. You'll find some cardstocks where you're just not going to get that kind of definition between the two, like on lighter colored cardstocks, but this and super dark colors. So somewhere in between you're going to get a really good result with just doing your embossing ink on the cardstock and get a really cool tone on tone. So that's tip number 1, is to use embossing ink without anything else and create a tone on tone look. All right, so our second technique, which is actually the one that I used on the card, is going to take that tone on tone a step further. So I do need to use an anti-static bag, and this is of course going to get rid of any static that may be out there that will make the embossing powder stick. And get all over the place where we really don't want it. So once I have that in place, then I can go ahead and do my stamping. And I am just doing the kind of the top half of this card because the bottom half is going to have another little element to it. So this is all I really need to add in here. So I have these little pieces here. And now I can go ahead and instead of leaving them plain like this, I'm going to go ahead and cover them in some clear embossing powder. And this will help if you don't get a good tone-on-tone result just by using the stamp pad by itself. Then when you add the clear embossing powder, you will get a definite tone-on-tone look. And then you're going to get that extra dimension of the embossing powder as it raises up. So now that I have that on here, I can just go ahead and heat this up. And as I'm heating, I like to swirl my heat gun around. And eventually it'll start to catch. It'll get hot enough that it will go ahead and catch and melt all that embossing powder. And you can see that now I have a more defined tone-on-tone look. So there's one other step that I'm going to add to this that's going to help add some dimension. And it's what I did on the card sample that really made this stand out. Okay, so now that that is all set, I'm going to go ahead and use some of my reinker and just put a little drop or two on my mat here. And grab a sponge dauber and use it like I would any other ink. So you see how when I daub that on there, I get kind of that tone-on-tone look again. So now I'm just adding in another layer of dimension to help make that pop out. And I don't necessarily need this to be neat. I'm just looking to make these guys stand out a little bit more. Now you could use these little daubers, or you can use the new domed foam blenders. It works just the same. As you can see, you'll get a larger area of embossing ink, but you can end up with the same result there. And then when this dries, it's going to stay discolored like this, so you're going to end up with that darker shade. So this is a great way to add in some soft color without actually using a colored ink, but just using the color of the paper and making it more rich using the embossing ink. All right, so the next one is this little medallion here, and I've got a little trick on this to make sure that you see what you're stamping. So this is a pretty big medallion, and you're going to want to make sure that you get really good coverage, but sometimes it's when you stamp it, especially on light colored cardstock, you don't see the impression. So of course you're going to use your anti-static like normal. And then you're going to go into your embossing ink and make sure you ink that up really, really good. And then I like to go into a darker but complementary color. So I'm going to be using copper embossing powder. So I'm going to go into this leather color. It's the level 3 color for this particular grouping of colors from scrapbook.com. So when this has still got the embossing ink on it, it's nice and juicy and it's sticky, so it's going to stay on here and it's going to stay activated for quite a while. So no problem, just going right into this dark brown color. And I don't need a lot on here. I don't need it to be perfect. I just need to be able to see that I've gotten a really good, clean, stamped impression. And there, I can see that I've got all the way around. And now, because I have the embossing ink in there as well, I don't have to worry about moving fast or any of it drying quickly, because with the embossing ink on there, it's just not going to dry fast. And I can go ahead and put my copper powder on there. You can see the one that I did on the back side already. And you can see that it sticks on there perfectly. So then when I go ahead and heat set it, I end up with a perfect result, just like this one. All right, so this last technique is kind of a 2-for-1. I've got this copper here, but then I also have these copper leaves smushed into the embossing powder. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So first I need to grab the leaf from that same set we were using earlier. So I've got the leaf ready to go. And I've got this piece of cardstock from Lawn Fawn. So the way that I can get this on here is one of 2 ways. I can use my sponge dauber or my foam blending tool again in that ink. And I can go like so and just get a whole bunch of embossing ink on there. Or I can go direct to paper with the ink pad. If you're just trying to get a little strip, you may be better off using one of the daubers, or you can go like so with your ink pad and go direct to. And then I can just go ahead and dip it in my embossing powder, and there's the result. Now, if I want to, I can go ahead and use my finger or a paintbrush to get that line exactly the way I want it. But now that I have this done, I'm going to go ahead and start heating this up. And as I heat it, I'm going to use the stamp to stamp into the hot embossing powder. Now I am going to ink this up with a little bit of the embossing ink, and that's just to help protect it and make sure that when I've stamped in here that it comes apart super fast. Okay, so let's get started with some heating. All right, so while this is nice and hot, I put my leaf right in there, and you can see that I got that stamp impression. Now if I don't like that impression, I can heat it up again. And you saw that I just went ahead and dipped into some of the embossing powder again. That gets me another layer, and sometimes it's better to have a little bit of a thick layer in order to do this technique. So now that I have that done, I can just stamp my leaves here, and you can see that it cools so quickly that I wasn't able to get that second impression, but that's okay. I'll just heat it up again, and it'll work this time. Very cool, right? So these are some all really great techniques that you can use to create a beautiful card. You can, of course, use any of those techniques on their own, but together they create a really stunning effect. I hope you enjoyed the techniques that I shared with you in today's Crafter's Toolbox. If you do end up using them, don't forget to hashtag PM Retreat on the projects that you share in social media, and I'd love to find them and share them with my audience. Thanks again for joining me, and until next time, happy crafting.